Welcome to Hard Talk from Bogota with me, Stephen Sackur. I've come to the Colombian capital for an exclusive interview with this country's new president. Ivn Duque is a youthful centre-right politician who faces enormous challenges in these early days of his presidency. Is he going to stick with that fragile peace deal agreed by his predecessor with the rebel group, the FARC? And how will he deal with the unfolding economic and humanitarian catastrophe in neighbouring Venezuela? Ivn Duque is a relatively untested political novice. How will he respond to these early challenges? President Ivn Duque, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be in your show.
I think I have to start with the crisis in Venezuela, a massive economic and humanitarian catastrophe in that country, which is having repercussions throughout the region. People are calling it the greatest migration crisis that Latin America has ever experienced. Is Colombia struggling to cope?
What is happening in Venezuela is the consequence of a dictatorship that has derailed independent powers, that has derailed free press, that has abused of all its population, and that has destroyed the economy. So there are thousands of people trying to find hope somewhere else, and the first choice is Colombia. We have now more than 800,000 Venezuelan citizens in Colombia, and we have to give them support. But now we need a stronger action from all Latin American countries among the OAS so that we can have a temporary protection status so that we can all support that population.
But I come back to the question. Right now, with those 800,000, some people are saying 1 million already, and it could go much higher. Right now, would you accept that Colombia is struggling to cope?
I think Colombia has a major situation with what's happening, but I think we have to be very articulate in terms of policy and in terms of solidarity. In terms of policy, I think we're doing the right thing, which is providing health, education, humanitarian support. And in terms of humanitarian assistance, we need to have a bigger action with the help of other countries.
I get to that.
But let me tell you something. The most important thing at this moment is that if the dictatorship does not end, the migration will not stop. And that's why, using all the diplomatic approaches necessary, we have to isolate the regime and ask for free elections so that people will have hope again and will move back to Venezuela in the following years.
Are you asking for regime change in Venezuela?
I think many countries are, and we are also asking for that. We have not recognized the last elections in Venezuela. Why? Because the dictator manipulated all the democratic system, the apparent democratic system, to keep himself in office. The Colombian government has not recognized that regime, and so many countries in Latin America has done the same thing.
I'll come back to the regional politics around all of this, but just to finish up on the humanitarian situation on your border, observers on the border are saying that in Colombia, if the Venezuelan people who have crossed that border do not have passports and all of their registration documents, they are not being allowed into the humanitarian aid centers and shelters. Why is that?
In Colombia, we have accepted people without having a passport. There are other countries in Latin America who are making those restrictions.
I understand that, but you are not giving them access to all of the humanitarian support, which you just told me about, but which if you do not have a passport, you cannot access.
We have been giving support to people without passports. We have for a long time. And actually, the situation...
The Washington Office on Latin America issued a report just the other day saying, quote, the Colombian government is making it difficult for Venezuelans to access humanitarian aid and shelter. This leaves migrants vulnerable to violence and exploitation.
I don't know about that report, but I can tell you that we have been keeping the same policy that began some months ago. And that policy has been to keep our borders open to humanitarian support. And we know that now is the time where we have to give back the solidarity that we got years ago from the Venezuelan people when we had a huge Colombian migration. So now we have to give ourselves to this solidarity, but at the same time we have to articulate the right policy so that we do the right thing.
Can you categorically say to me now that Colombia will never close its border to Venezuelans?
We have never done that, and we should not. But we have to face the fact that now Colombia by itself is not going to be the solution. We need to have some support from other countries. But let me say this. We have also to call for an international action, diplomatic international action, that allows the regime to step out so that they can have free elections in Venezuela, and that free elections can re-optimize people confidence to go back to Venezuela.
How much intervention are you prepared to support? I noticed just the other day you had a meeting with US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. You've also met with the US UN ambassador, who said after meeting you, quote, at some point Maduro is going to have to be dealt with. Are you, the Americans and others, talking about a direct intervention to get rid of Maduro?
I have never talked about military actions. What I have said is that we have to use all the diplomatic measures that are needed. Last year, I denounced Nicolás Maduro at the International Criminal Court with the support of 76 senators from Colombia and 50 members of the Chilean parliament. Now I'm asking to other presidents of Latin America to support the denouncement that the Secretary General of the OAS has placed against Maduro. And I also believe that we have to make a case before the UN Security Council so that we can demonstrate that Maduro is giving shelter to Colombian terrorist groups.
Just the other day, after you took over as president, we saw an incident where you accused Venezuelans of sending helicopters and I believe 30 troops into your territory.
That was 2 days ago, and those are provocations. We cannot get into provocations. What we need to do at this moment is use all the diplomatic measures to denounce those incursions in Colombian territory, but we're not going to get into any military action.
This crisis in Venezuela is having a huge impact on your country and is putting a strain on your country. But people here in Colombia, in your first couple of weeks in the job as president, they want to know what you're going to do about the peace deal struck with the FARC by your predecessor. You opposed it, and people now wonder whether you want to scrap that deal. Do you?
I always said that we were not going to destroy the agreement, that we had to make the right amendments so that we could have a lasting peace in Colombia. What does that mean? That we can put an end to the expansion of illegal crops, that we can sanction the people who have hidden weapons or assets that should be given to attend the victims, and something that is necessary as well. People that are condemned for crimes against humanity have to leave Congress while they serve their sentence, but the party can replace those seats so they don't lose the seats that they already have. That's coherence. And that's just trying to make the Colombian people believe that reparation, de-armament, demobilization, and attending the victims are preserved as principles.
But what you actually said before the presidential election was this. You said, we cannot allow FARC leaders to participate in politics. That is a catastrophe until they have provided reparations to all of their victims, told all of the truth, and completed their sentences. So you appear to be saying that contrary to the agreement, FARC leaders cannot play a role in politics?
What I said is what actually my predecessor said in the midst of the plebiscite of the referendum in 2016. What did he say? He said that people who are responsible for crimes against humanity will not be able to run for office until they serve the sentence, tell the truth, and repair the victims. So they're now in Congress. What I'm saying at this moment is that any amendment should emphasize that people who have condemned for crimes against humanity, they have to leave the seat, but the seat can be replaced from another member who does not have a debt with justice for crimes against humanity.
This effort of yours to change the nature of the deal,
To modify.
Well, you say modify. I guess it reflects what your critics call your reliance on the support and the backing of former President Alvaro Uribe. He hated that deal. He continues to hate that deal. And some in Colombia see you as his puppet.
Well, you know, I'm the president of Colombia. I was elected with the biggest voting turnout in Colombia's history. And I want to serve the whole Colombian people. And what the whole Colombian people want is to have lasting peace. And to have lasting peace, we need to have justice, and justice needs legality.
And you are playing with fire, because if you say you want peace, listen to these words from the International Crisis Group, a respected bunch of international consultants who look at this deal, look at Colombia's politics, and they say, if you continue with your efforts to modify the deal, quote, it could spark renewed violence, it could hinder the extension of state authority and legal economic activity to those long neglected rural areas, and it could fuel the growth of illicit armed groups, i.e., Colombia could sink back into the violence that we saw before.
Today, unfortunately, what we have seen year and a half after the agreement has been signed is that we have seen exponential growth in illegal crops. We have seen FARC dissidents grow in the territory and create a threat to the Colombian population.
Are you saying the peace deal is not working?
In some places of the country, it's not. And it has been recognized even by the people who were supporters before.
Well, actually, let's look at the facts. You know, we've got.
But let me just finish the argument there. When we look at what's going on in Colombia today, the thing that we all desperately want is to have a lasting peace. And in order to have it, we must amend the things that are not going well.
This is a two-party deal. Look at what the FARC are doing in response to your efforts to modify. Also, the discussion that you are having about extraditing to the United States a FARC commander, Jesus Santrich, who is actually supposed to be one of the lead negotiators, who is a fundamental part of the peace agreement. You appear to be ready to extradite him to the United States, and in response, FARC leaders, including Ivn Duques, have gone back to the jungle. You are running the risk of reigniting this conflict.
Let me tell you something. When was Santrich captured? During the Santos administration. What happened after he was captured? President Santos gave a TV speech with the Attorney General. And the Attorney General, in front of the Colombian people with my predecessor, said that they had a strong evidence that this person was still having narco-trafficking operations after the agreement has been signed. So he was captured not by my administration, was captured by my predecessor.
I understand that, but you are the guy who's going to have to make the decision.
And I said, in the agreement, it's very clear that if you commit crimes after the signing of the agreement, you are not going to have any differentiated treatment. So it has to go to ordinary justice, and if the ordinary justice puts before of my desk the signing of the extradition, it is my duty to do so. And I will fulfill my duty if that's necessary.
What do you think the chances are of Colombia sinking back into a war between the state and the guerrillas in the FARC?
I don't see that happening. Because actually, I said from the very first day of my administration, all the members of FARC who are part of the FARC base, who have demobilized, reinserted, we're going to give them support. We're going to help them find a productive activity. We're going to give them psychological attendance. And we want social investment to keep on going to the regions that have been affected by violence. And we have to fulfill those promises.
The truth is, the most worrying violence in Colombia today isn't actually coming from these rebel groups, guerrillas. It's coming from unknown militias, paramilitaries, and common criminals who are killing by the hundreds community activists, social rights campaigners, particularly in rural areas. A stunning figure for you. According to your own ombudsman's office here in the state of Colombia, more than 300 of these activists have been killed since 2016. Now, of course, that's not on your watch. You've only been president for a couple of weeks. But what are you going to do about it?
Actually, today, before I came to this interview, we had a meeting with all the institutions that are involved in protecting human rights in Colombia. And we have to present a new policy framework in the weeks to come so that we can have a joint action. First to prevent, and then to sanction and to investigate who's behind those crimes.
So what is the sickness in this country that allows human rights and social activist campaigners to be killed by the hundred? And it has to be said that Colombia's own Inspector General, Fernando Carrillo, has said that he believes the military and the police are collaborating with criminal gangs. What is going on?
First of all, if there are people from the military or the police involved in those crimes, they should be investigated and bring to justice.
You will do that?
Of course. And I also said that all the narco-trafficking organizations in the country who are also behind some of those crimes are going to be attacked by us. And they're going to be dissuaded and they're going to be brought to justice. But we're not going to allow impunity in any crime in Colombia, and especially with any social leader.
Isn't one of the structural, the fundamental problems in Colombia that many of the poor, particularly in rural areas, look at and I don't mean to be personal, but look at a president such as yourself from an elite family, like all of Colombia's other presidents have been, and we know that this is one of the most unequal societies in Latin America, and they think to themselves, we are never going to get social justice from a president like this.
My story is different. I'm not a person from the elite.
Well, your father was a former provincial governor.
My father was born in a rural area, and he made his career working hard. We're from a middle-class family. My father went to public education, so did my grandfather. And we have always worked and get our things by working.
But if I may say so, your links with Alvaro Uribe, the way you've made your way in politics, you are young, you are successful, but to the poor and the disadvantaged in this country, are you really saying that you're their champion?
My program, the program that I used in the election, that I built in the election, from the bottom to the top, was based on one principle: equality, social justice. And I said that in the day I took my oath of office. This is going to be the government of social justice, and I have to work hard to put an end to the social divide.
You're going to have to work very hard. Let me quote you here's the words of a researcher at the Foundation Forjando Futuros, a Medellin-based NGO, Ilhan Khan. He says this: the local elites, the big landowners, the businessmen, they feel empowered by the election of a new right-wing government.
First of all, I've always considered myself a centrist, and I run with a centrist platform. And the best way of putting this into the center is that we need to have social equality. But the only way to get social equality is to make this country have equal opportunities for people who have talent and creativity to begin their entrepreneurships, to be able to generate jobs. And my goal and I'm going to work very hard for that, is that we create the right environment so that we can have a middle-class expansion and put an end to extreme poverty.
You are the latest president to come into office declaring that you will take on the narco-traffickers, you will conquer Colombia's drug problem. And you say you're going to get tough, you're going to demand more manual eradication, you're going to go back to the aerial fumigation, the use of pesticides from the air to kill the crops. But I put it to you that all of this tough talk has been heard before, and it never, ever works in Colombia.
What we need to have is coherence in policy. Coherence means to have state policy. We reduced illegal crops from 1999 to 2012 from 180,000 hectares to 50,000. Today we have more than 200,000. What is it that we need to do? To have an integral program. That it has to do with eradication and substitution, but at the same time it has to do to promote entrepreneurship and find productive activities for those peasants.
Sure, but what you're talking about when it comes to specifically the growth of the coca and the cocaine trade, you're talking about prohibition, you're talking about getting tougher and tougher, working with the Americans as well. But there are many Latin American leaders, most of them interestingly retired, not current, who say, forget about it, prohibition is never going to work. You can talk about Perez Molina in Guatemala, you can talk about Vicente Fox and Calderon in Mexico, you can even talk about Cesar Gaviria in this country. All of them have concluded that this focus on prohibition is never going to work, and there have to be more creative solutions. Have you got one?
If the world wants to put an end to prohibition, it has to be a global effort. But what you cannot do is to legalize in a country while there's prohibition in the rest of the world. It has to be a joint effort. It's the only way that the debate can be sound and the solution can be equal to everyone.
So for you, the war on drugs, do you just ramp it up?
What I've said about drugs is that we want to have a society free of drugs, but we have to use an integral approach. We have to go to prevention again. Prevention in the family, prevention in the schools. We have to treat the people who are addicted in the right way. And we should not criminalize the people that are consumers. But we have to make eradication and substitution, and at the same time, we have to use pedagogy in society. So those are the kinds of integral things that I've been presenting to the Colombian people. And it's coherent, but it's not only just coherent, it's needed. Because when you see people in Colombia, from families that are vulnerable in economic terms, if someone gets into the drug abuse, that family is going to have a tremendous problem to get out of that situation. So that's why prevention, the joint action of substitution and eradication, and at the same time, giving to those peasants who are in the coca production zones the possibility to have a productive activity are the kinds of integral policies that we want to put together.
A final thought. Thanks to Colombia's latest constitution, you only have one term. You have 4 years to achieve everything that you've talked about in this interview, including making peace, a real lasting peace with the guerrillas, including beating the drug lords and the narco traffickers and getting drugs out of Colombia, and, as you say, committing yourself to equality. That is the most ambitious agenda. You've only got 4 years.
I'll tell you, I've been working very hard, and I'm here with my program every day. And I'm going to fulfill what we said in our program because we want to deliver to the Colombian people. I might not reach everything that I want, but I'm going to work hard to achieve it. And that's why I was elected, and that's why I'm giving the best of myself to serve the Colombian people.
President Iván Duque, we have to end there, but thank you very much for being on HARDtalk.
Thank you so much.
Much appreciated, Mr. President. Thank you very much indeed.